kind of random.
What does joining Hip Hop Now's Patreon mean? It means supporting the kind of hip-hop content that keeps you updated on the latest hip-hop news and moves. It means supporting the production of content like That Time in Hip Hop and Hip Hop Now Reviews. It means you care about the conversation and preservation of hip-hop music and culture. Hip Hop Now Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, merchandise, and more. Support the movement. Become a supporter of Hip Hop Now podcast today at patreon.com/Hip Hop Now.
Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, young Dolph is murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. Snoop Dogg talks about running Death Row while dropping a new Def Jam compilation. And Will Smith and LL Cool J in a Verzuz? Would that work? Let's talk about it.
Let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album. Classic album.
Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop, music, and culture that happen throughout the week. This podcast is brought to you by the producers of this podcast over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would like to become a producer of this podcast and not only get exclusive and timed exclusive podcast episodes, but also a say in the production and the future of this very podcast. The link is in this. It's in the description, man. It's in the description of every episode. All you have to do is wherever you're listening right now, look at the description and you'll see Patreon. Click that link, find out more. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, djbooth.net, XXL magazine.com, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. First and foremost, we got to say a quick rest in peace to young Dolph, who was murdered recently in Memphis, Tennessee, which is his hometown, which for most people who saw that famous Boosie interview on that guy's platform, who shall remain nameless, but yet again, you can't really front on the content that was received. But Boosie said, you need to not hang around or live in your hometown, because most of the rappers, right, come from the ghetto. And there's some guys, and to quote Boosie, who are hypnotized by hate. It's a very compelling plea from a guy who felt the same way to hip-hop artists and younger artists. In the case of young Dolph, I believe he was like 36. And it's sort of been a thing that's dominated hip-hop news recently. So we wouldn't be doing hip-hop music, culture, and history justice by not honoring that man's name, because regardless of what he was mixed in, regardless of how and why it happened, a man lost his life. And from what I hear and from what I've seen, even in the past before he passed away, he wasn't all bad. I'll just put it that way. You can do your research. So let's first and foremost give young Dolph a moment of silence. Rest in peace. So if you listen to this podcast frequently, you heard me say a couple of podcasts back, right? I've been sick, but I kept giving you bonus content to keep you going, right? And that will continue. Sometimes you'll get the weekly show, right? Sometimes you get some bonus content because hip hop news can tend to be similar from week to week or dry. And honestly, this, like I know, this is not a podcast that is designed to only talk about rumors and nonsense. Because at the end of the day, we all here for the music. And that's what really, really, really matters at the end of the day. So, in new hip hop news, Will Smith says that him and LL Cool J discussed doing a Verzuz, and my reaction, if you would like to know, I think I like it. Now, let's not get it twisted. LL Cool J is the GOAT. I've done an episode on it. Look it up. I'm not going to explain it to you right now. He's the GOAT. And some would say, well, how can Will Smith even compare to LL Cool J? Well, when you think about it, it's not as far-fetched as you would think. Both come from the 80s, mid to late 80s, as far as start of their career. Young hits, young lions. Will Smith, who was the Fresh Prince, not a Bel Air, but the Fresh Prince out of Philly or Pennsylvania. I don't want the Philly heads to hit me, so wherever he's from, but we just said Philly, right? He hit in the 80s. LL Cool J out of Queens, Farmers. He hit in the 80s. But what makes this actually a good idea is the fact that they both had extremely longevity in the rap career. And I think LL, we know Too Short, E40 on that, but we're just talking about artists, hip hop artists that are as big as them. Too Short, E40, yes, but they're more regionally big artists, Like they're widely known, right, amongst hip hop heads, but as far as like legends in the game, not too many people look at them that way. And that's not me saying that. That's just in general. But in general, Will Smith and LL Cool J are household names compared to those two. And they continue to have hits from the 80s all the way through to the 2000s. Now, with Verzuz, people sometimes forget what Verzuz are. I know in the beginning, we looked at it as a battle. And I know recently, Jadakiss reminded you that it was a battle. But at the end of the day, what Verzuz is, at its core, is a celebration of the music of two artists who are linked in one way or another. I gave you one link as far as their longevity, but they both have commercial hits. They both have some of the biggest hits ever. You know what I mean? Like, I could think of a million LL Cool J hits, right? Because he the GOAT. But there's not too many cats from his era that can continue dropping music from other generations. Because you got to think about it. If you start in the 80s and you still having hits in the 2000s, well, now generations of hip-hop fans know your music or grew up on it. Because you had a hit when, such and such was in the prom in 89 and this other cat was in the prom in 95 and another cat was going to his prom in the early 2000s. And Headsprung was being played. And it was all LL Cool J. That could easily be like a grandfather, father, and grandson all growing up. Well, not growing up, but you know what I mean. All having LL Cool J and Will Smith have hits during their time. That's crazy. So that's the through line with those two, but probably more importantly, they're both actors. Obviously, Will Smith is a bigger actor. They both have some timeless classics, right? Timeless. You will still hear one of their songs when they're gone. Will Smith, probably more so. Summertime, it's probably never going to go away. That is a bona fide classic of all time. I don't care if he sound like Rakim. When summer's here, if I don't hear that record, it's not summer. That's just how it is. It's sort of like with certain Christmas songs. But LL, so this is the thing, right? So Verzuz is a celebration, right, of the artist. But also, especially in the recent Verzuz formats, it's about performance. Well, both of these guys come from the same era. I never realized how much they almost kind of perform alike in some ways. You know what I'm saying? Not the same energy, not the same songs. We know LL gonna hit the stage to make a killing, but they have comparable energy levels. So the show would be crazy. And everybody would know the song. See, some of those like Jadakiss, I'm not Jadakiss, well, he stood out, right? But the Lox and Dipset is more so like, that's a specific fan base that's going to be into that. KRS-One and Big Daddy Kane, that's a specific fan base that's going to be into that, right? The Redman and Method Man, same thing. That might be tipping it a little bit as far as universal appeal goes, but it's still like a unique fan base. Man, Will Smith and LL, they can have everybody watching. Because you're going to get people who are going to look at them now, right? Will Smith is corny. His wife is entangled. What does he have? Until he drops brand new funk. Men in Black, Going to Miami, Summertime, right? Those are the new things. I ain't even go to Parents Just Don't Understand and stuff like that. These are records that people will say, you know what? Will Smith kind of got a couple of joints, right? Got enough joints. Does he really beat LL if we start to match up songs? I don't think so. LL got too much. LL got underground classics, crazy features, the commercial records that are hits from the 80s, right? He could do 20 songs for the ladies by itself. Then he can follow that up with 20 songs for the hip hop heads. For real, for real. And then another part of Verzuz, I know I'm getting excited for somebody who doesn't even watch them. But another part of that is the fact that, you know, there's guests. You can bring guests up. Now, we know DJ Jazzy Jeff is a monster on the wheels of steel, so LL might have to bring Scratch back again in order to have a comparable DJ on his side. But LL has done so many dope features that he could probably drop another 20 songs off of features that he's done. It's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? So I remember before people trying to match LL up with different people as far as a Verzuz. LL and Busta, nah, the energy's too different. We can't listen to LL's 80s hits followed by Busta's 90s hits. It's just gonna be like it's two eras competing with one another. But Will Smith and LL could do that. It's just that LL is the GOAT. I'm just saying. So it's definitely interesting, and it might be interesting enough for me to watch that one, and I don't watch it, and that's almost why it's a perfect Verzuz. But the Verzuz that is coming up, for those who want to know, is Bone Thugs and Harmony versus 3 6 Mafia. I think that one works, but it's also kind of weird, right? Because Bone Thugs and Harmony is just a whole other vibe as a group. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be dope to see them, but it's a whole nother vibe from 3 6 Mafia. But it will be dope to see. So we'll see how all of this goes down. But I'm really interested by the Will Smith LL Cool J pairing. I think it's the one that works, to be honest. Again, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to check out a video version of this podcast along with other videos. And you wonder, I love your audio podcast, but you should have a YouTube channel. I do. The link to that YouTube channel is in the description of this episode. It's called the B-Roll Network on YouTube. It not only features Hip Hop Now podcast in video form, but it also features a long-standing series that you've bear witness to, right? Via audio, it came through audio on this very podcasting stream called That Time in Hip Hop. Maybe you were listening to those episodes and never knew that there were produced videos talking about all that historical content from hip hop's illustrious history. I know I'm grandstanding this week, so what? But definitely check it out, subscribe to the channel, watch a couple videos. Not only is there hip hop content, but a brother likes to play some video games from time to time, and I share that content there because why not? And lastly, because this week the news is very low because of what happened to young Dolph, as far as what's interesting to hip hop fans. But there was something interesting that happened while I was out sick, and it kind of plays into something that dropped recently. So for those that don't know, Snoop Dogg has a situation, a deal. I forget the actual title, but, more than like, I don't want to say artist development, but more like what Jay-Z had in some ways, right? Like a well-known figurehead in music who can attract up-and-coming and current hip-hop stars, right? So Snoop has a deal with Def Jam where he's running that right now. And he put out a compilation to kind of launch that idea. That compilation is like, I think like 25 songs, maybe about an hour and 7 minutes in length. Features range from Mount Westmore, right? That's Too Short, E40, Ice Cube, and Snoop as a group. That album should be coming soon, but there's a single on here called Big Subwoofer. I love that record to death. He also has a record with Jadakiss and Benny the Butcher. Benny the Butcher, who recently signed to Def Jam Records, which is dope. I wonder if that was Snoop, right? Could have been. Probably was. Who knows? But it also features other artists here and there, and Mary J. Blige is on there, and there's some up-and-coming artists there. And what I like about it, this is like a quasi-review of it. What I do like about it is we haven't had something like this in a long time. Typically, when you get this combination of artists on one record, especially from one label, it's usually like a soundtrack to a movie. But back in my day, they used to do this kind of thing all the time. Put out a compilation that showcased the artists that are on the label. And it was sort of refreshing because I was just listening. At first I was listening because I thought it was a Snoop album. By the way, the name of the album is Algorithm. I should have said that earlier. Algorithm is the name of the Snoop album, Snoop Dogg. But I was listening, right? Because Snoop released an album called From the Streets to the Suites earlier this year, and I liked it a lot. So I was like, why is he dropping another album? Like, that one was good. But now we know why. And it just was surprising at first because I was like, is Snoop even on this song? And another song was like that, and I'm like, wait a minute. And then it dawned on me like, oh, this is a compilation. And then it started to make sense with Fabulous, who I believe is still on Def Jam, being on here also. Dave East, who's on Def Jam. Dave East sounds really good over West Coast production. I think he should do a mixtape or EP or something like that because I think sometimes Dave East can sound redundant with his flow in recent years, but he put that flow over a West Coast beat, and I was like, yo, that might be something you should do, homie. Try that one out. You never know. But nevertheless, the compilation was pretty good. And I'm going to listen to it again because I think before, I was kind of working and listening to it and bobbing. And I started to realize, like, man, I need to listen to this again so I could look up some of these artists because I was impressed, especially by some of the singers. So if you don't know, Def Jam doesn't only have rappers, they also have singers, right? So check it out. It's called Algorithm. Go to your favorite streaming app. I heard Tidal has a free tier now, finally. So you can try that out. I might do that. I might go back again just to see what they're doing that's new, but it's pretty dope. But I talk about that compilation because I watched Snoop on like a video cut from a podcast, Gilly the Kid's podcast. I forget what it's called because I don't listen. But they was talking to Snoop, and Snoop was like, Death Row should let me run that thing. Now, Death Row has been sold all kinds of different ways, so it's not owned by Suge Knight. It's not owned or ran by his wife. It's with some other company now. And he alluded to possibly being able to purchase that thing. And he talked about if they'd allowed him to run it about 5 years ago, some major artists like YG, for example, he could have signed them because he was messing with them before they were signed. And he could have did that and put them out under a new Death Row moniker. I got to say this as far as my opinion. I think this has to happen. I know Snoop just signed with Def Jam. I know he has to probably fulfill some obligations, get it out the way. 2023, start talking about, I bought Death Row and Dr. Dre's going to help and we bringing a new Death Row back with new artists, blah, blah, blah. Because there's just something about hearing Snoop and other artists we knew from the past embracing that name again, making that name mean something different. Keeping that energy from the past, but I think Snoop could actually pull off having a new Death Row Records that's hot. Now, obviously, he got to get the right artists to make it work, put out the right music, the right production, the right promotion. But if you know, like I know, not only is Snoop taking every job he can, but Snoop is really living off of his name. Because again, he's releasing music that's good to me, but he doesn't need it. It's like 50, right? Like 50 Cent is killing it with these TV shows. It's kept his name alive. So if he was to release an album, even if it was whack, at least he still has a shot at least 2 million people wanting to check it out or buy it. I'm not making any predictions. I'm just saying. Their brands are airtight right now. Their brands are good money in the same ways that Jay-Z and Nas are, right? Their situation is they're making a lot of money, but when Nas drops an album, people flock to talk about it, flock to go hear it. I don't know, maybe we keep thinking Illmatic's going to happen again, but it's not. Not to say that what we're getting ain't good, but you know what I'm saying? Nas's brand is good in these streets. If Jay-Z tomorrow say, yo, Black Friday, Black Album 2, boom, people will be going crazy. That's all you'll see on social media, right? Black Album just had an anniversary. It would be dope to do that, Jigga. I'm saying. You're welcome. But imagine, right? Snoop Dogg buys Death Row Records and releases first single featuring, older Death Row artists with a couple of newcomers on it. Stranded on Death Row Part 2, produced by somebody who can make a dope version of it, I'm guessing. People would be talking. like, yo, this might be all right. Because I'm telling you, typically, black record labels don't get a second life. They just don't. They either die or you forget that they still exist, Bad Boy Records. Now, Bad Boy still exists, but not in the way you remember it. It's still there. It's some big artists that are on Bad Boy, but you would never know because it doesn't have the same cachet. People don't associate Janelle Monáe with Bad Boy Records, even though she's on Bad Boy Records. They just don't. They only talk about the artists of the past. That's it. But Snoop is in your face with everything he does. So if he's announcing that Death Row Records is back, and at least he can give you a taste of something crazy, isn't Kendrick Lamar a free agent? Wouldn't that be crazy? Death Row Records, y'all. We got new artists. We signed Corrupt again or whoever, or Exhibit for some nostalgia. But our marquee artist with an album coming soon is Kendrick Lamar from the CPT. Man, listen. It could be huge for hip-hop in general, and it could be a blueprint for the black labels that still exist, if they do, right? To know that they can have a resurgence. I think it would be dope. What about you? That's going to do it for me this week. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, TikTok, at Vegas World INC. And please know that this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you have to do is click the link in the description, hit that subscribe button if you like it, hit the like button wherever you're listening. If you want to review it on iTunes. It helps me out. Trust me. But more importantly, share this podcast with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.